Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 167 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can, whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game to the next level. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Rob.
How we doing, Rob?
All right. I mean, it's life.
Yeah.
In the summertime.
Yeah.
So, I'm constantly unsurprised by what the next stress is. Now, I think at this point it's I left my phone over there. Can you grab it?
Oh, yeah. I know what you were pointing at.
No, so I was like, did I really leave that over there? I did. And I want to be able to see live chat. I feel like if like a deep one showed up, we'd all just be like, oh, is it Tuesday already?
Well, this might as well happen, yeah.
Is it Tuesday already?
Yeah.
I didn't think it was,
Yeah.
And not even like, there was a point that we would joke about, like, we wouldn't be surprised by ghosts or UFOs or things like that. Now I think we're just numb in many ways.
I'd kind of welcome them,
Yeah.
Just be like, hey guys, join the party.
Yeah, but is it one more crazy? Like, I'd almost be like, maybe give us a week or a month just to kind of get a few things together, because I feel embarrassed. Like, if this is the end of the world, can you just, like, 5 minutes, let me take a shower.
Right.
So, but, speaking of, giant dumps, we have a show to do tonight.
Yeah, I was saying at dinner, I almost feel a little bit bad about asking if you would, be willing to take a crack at 7th Sea 2nd edition.
Yeah. But it's good that we did, and especially after the kind of stuff that we've already talked about.
Well, I only say I feel bad because, we had a discussion earlier when we were kind of going over our show sheet and stuff like that, and making sure that we're all on the same page pre-show.
Yeah.
And just as that discussion went on, you were just getting angrier and angrier.
Yeah, I'm more frustrated than angry. Like, there's still a love for 7th Sea. I still have a love. I'm not saying 7th Sea 1st edition was flawless in any way. It's got its heads, but there's so much love and beauty in it that I have, and I really do appreciate so much of it, that when I look at 2nd edition, I had such high hopes of what it could be, and like getting my hands on it, turning the page like, wow. What? Okay. What the actual what? And because it's so different.
Yeah.
And so now, I mean, it's been a while. I mean, okay, so I'm going to get right into this. Well,
hold on. I just wanted to say this. This is the reason I wanted to do this.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Is this cathartic? Is this actual Wednesday night therapy?
Well, no. This is actually a continuation of the discussion we had, a few weeks ago about the Ship of Theseus.
Yes.
Okay. About the changing between editions of mechanics, of, what the focus of the game is and stuff like that. And when a new edition goes too far, when they have replaced enough of the Ship of Theseus that it is officially no longer the same ship anymore.
Right.
And, where do you reach that point where it has crossed that line for some gamers? And this was 7th Sea 2nd edition was probably the thing that, like, I had seen, I'd been talking to Sean about some stuff about 5th edition D&D, that had originally spawned that discussion, but, I was then reading something on Reddit about 7th Sea 2nd edition, and there seemed to be this disparity between, players who didn't interact with 1st edition and old fans of 1st edition.
Yes.
And it seemed like the people who came into it in 2nd edition didn't understand what the big deal was. Mm-hmm. And people who had played 1st edition basically on site disavowed the system.
I would agree with that statement. I think that was very common. I think there was still a lot of people who loved 1st edition who stepped into 2nd edition and felt that it was a palate cleanser. Mm-hmm. Like they could bring their knowledge from 1st edition and effectively play 1st edition in 2nd, play the world of 1st edition in 2nd edition and still enjoy it.
Sure.
And get that thing. And there's still a ton of love for 7th Sea out there. And I don't think that there was animosity between the groups either. Mm-hmm. I think it was just like, I don't understand from this perspective, that perspective.
Yeah, but I didn't really see anybody saying like, oh no, you're wrong for liking Second edition or anything like that.
Which we saw early on with like D&D versus D&D Second Edition.
Yeah, there's definitely some elitism and gatekeeping and stuff that takes place there. Yeah, but I didn't see any of that.
Yeah,
at least in this discussion.
Yeah,
but to the point though, that's the reason I wanted to do the system spotlight.
Mm-hmm.
Is not only because it's a game system that we haven't looked at before. We really haven't looked at much. I think Call of Cthulhu was the only other Chaosium game that we've ever looked at.
Yes.
So it's a new game system we haven't looked at before.
From a new design perspective, and it wasn't Chaosium to start with.
It's something you love, but also, kind of on a side note, I did kind of want to do the compare and contrast of like, why, in looking at this, in spotlighting this game system, can we examine at least a little bit why it kind of did a belly flop?
Yeah.
On arrival.
Yeah. At least for some of us.
Sure.
At least for some of us. So, to understand this, I would say you have to kind of go far enough back to know that John Wick, was
Not that John Wick.
Correct. Although with the firearms, you could almost question it. Started this whole project with, Aldraic, which was AEG, and you'll see AEG on all kinds of products still. Like, they're still very much out there, doing all kinds of stuff. And there's a lot of, I'm not going to say shared property, inspiration, kind of a thing that 7th Sea produced when it came out in 1999, which really isn't that long ago. Like, in game system history, that's not that long. But there were a lot of, there was card game that came out of it. There were other board-style games that came kind of off the sides of it. Love Letter was another one that came off of it. That was all part of this kind of swashbuckling genre and romance genre.
Oh, was Love Letter a 7th Sea?
First, yes and no.
Huh. Okay.
Like, take a good look at it and you'll wonder, how it's not part of the system. It's an inspiration, if you will, and or a side story, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, it's a card game, if I remember correctly.
It's a social spinning card game.
I saw a game played on tabletop with Will Wheaton.
I have it upstairs.
Yeah.
And I've played it. In 2004, during the rise of D20, AEG stepped into Swashbuckling Adventures, which was the D20 version of 7th Sea.
Yep.
And what was interesting about that time was they actually dual worked all of the books. So anything new that was added to Swashbuckling Adventures still had D10 rules in it.
Okay.
So you could do both. So in a lot of ways, it was errata that was split.
Sure.
But was carried through. And I thought that was kind of cool. Looking at some of that stuff, a lot of people, and I never used any of it, even as reference materials, because I often felt that it was a shift. And so I didn't follow into Swashbuckling Adventures at all. In 2015, AEG transferred that ownership back to John directly. There's some stuff there, but it's all logistical, really. In 2016 is when he kickstarted the 2nd edition, which was right after that. And then during that, he kickstarted a second flavor of 7th Sea, which was the East Asian inspired.
Is this pronounced Kitai?
Thank you. Because I would totally butcher it. And unfortunately it failed. Like, straight up didn't work out. But all of that got picked up by Chaosium in 2019. So now it's all sitting under Chaosium and shows as such. And honestly, if you go looking for 7th Sea stuff in Drive-Thru RPG or in other places, it is kind of misleading. You'll see 1st edition stuff mingled with 2nd edition stuff because they didn't change up titling very well. And it's definitely added to the confusion. And even Swashbuckling Adventure stuff kind of gets blended in there as well. Because it's all under one thing under Chaosium, whereas before you could say AEG did this, and this is now John Wick, and then this is, now it's Chaosium. Yeah, so there was a lot of things there. But 1st edition had a direct card game that went with it that had a lot of ebb and flow with it because It was good. People really liked it. It was a neat system. They then incorporated a lot of that, a lot of those characters in the stories that were in there. So there was places where you could actually fit the card game into the physical role-playing game.
Oh, yeah, they did a lot of the same stuff with Legend of the Five Rings.
Exactly.
Where they had whole, like, card tournaments, and the winners of that tournament essentially got to, like, the story of the winning championship game.
Yep.
Got written into novel form, essentially, and became the next plot arc.
And the problems with that, were varied, but like with any game, they reproduced, they made new versions, they made new versions of cards, and eventually people just got sick and tired of having to buy the new versions of new cards with new rules, and tweaking that, not unlike any other card game.
Sure.
Chaosium did a new card game called Sweet Jenny. I know nothing about it.
Okay.
But it looks swashbuckly, kind of love letter-esque from what I can tell.
Sure.
When this Kickstarter, and I could go into detail about the Kickstarter and I won't. I will simply say this. The Kickstarter had a great following at its onset, and there was a lot thrown into it. And a lot of love and a lot of compassion from the people who were the patrons who kickstarted it. Mm-hmm. To the tune that there were several who paid thousands, hundreds and thousands of dollars to have themselves put into the story. They loved the idea of that, and you basically you could pay $1,000 and your character was going to go in one of the books.
Yeah.
Which is great. It's immortalizing yourself in the game that you wanted to be.
Absolutely.
As early as 2 months ago, the requests for where's my character in the story have still gone unanswered for some of these people, where they've not been made whole. So there's a certain sense of animosity that is coming from the Kickstarter still yet, because it was John's and then Chaosium, and I think some of the transition there has made it very confusing on who holds that.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to put blame. I'm not going to put confusion. There's all kinds of bureaucracy and business and communications and even technical things that can go into trying to manage that level stuff. Nor am I going to make light of those of people's love for the system and their despair of what happened with the Kickstarter and how disenfranchised they are with it.
Sure.
I have to literally set that off to the side. I have my own opinions on it. I came in at a level where I got the Black Pirate Edition book. It's still not cracked as a book.
Oh wow.
Like, I've opened it, I've read through it, I'm pleased to a degree with what I received, but I can tell you there are digital assets that I never got.
Oh wow.
Because the coupons expired before DriveThruRPG could honor them, and all a DriveThruRPG says is go back to the Kickstarter and ask them to get new ones.
Oh jeez.
And so there are literally assets I don't have, which is very frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So, but I'm gonna for this I'm gonna focus on the first book, because realistically that's what we focused on for all of our shows, is we're trying to show here is as you see the system. Like, if I'm a new person and I grab, like the traditional, I go to the store, I grab the book off the shelf, or I go to DriveThruRPG, I grab the core book. This is my experience going into it. And so I'm going to try and do my damnedest to look at it from that perspective. and not suffer our listeners to go through and accept me comparing it constantly to first edition. I will wait for your questions to do that.
Okay, fair enough.
So where would you like to start? Would you want to do a book teardown a little bit to kind of talk about where the focuses were? Because I think that kind of paints its own picture for some systems.
Well, let's talk just a little bit about, like, what is 7th Sea. I know we talk about it, like, if you're a long-term listener of the show, you'll have probably heard Rob talk about this a bunch in the past, but I don't think we've ever had, like, a dedicated discussion about what 7th Sea actually is.
So I'm gonna try and do it from the perspective of 2nd edition as you read it in the book. Yeah. And that is 7th Sea is a romantic portrayal of European countries and European folk tales, including the UK, as far out as Russia, as far south as the Mediterranean Sea, and its folklore, its history, and aspects of the 17th century in Europe. Now, that 17th century is broad. If you're a historian, please do not take that as law. It is a very broad statement.
It's Europe if you squint at it.
At the 17th century. It is pre-industrial revolution, post-medieval. So it's Renaissance to a degree.
You're looking at less knights in shining armor and more swashbucklers with rapiers and single-shot pistols.
Correct.
That you like flintlock.
Correct. Yeah. And each of the countries are poised in an important part of history during that time, whether it's mythically or physically. So, for instance, mythically, you have Avalon, the Highland Marches, and Innsmore. Now, for anybody who can squint their eyes and look at that, that's England, Ireland, and Scotland.
Yep.
And you have a queen, Elaine, who sounds very much like a historical queen coming into power who has no king, who is in control of the Grail, a holy relic that the Inish people raise above everything else because it holds the power to keep this glamour magic upon the island and allows it to be there, and this, which is a very powerful thing. So they revere her holding that seat, because the moment that she is not worthy of it, it will fall from her hand and chaos will come. Because it's more than just giving glamour, there's a protection that goes along with that.
Sure.
And the Highland Marches are a proud people who are constantly struggling between joining Avalon and being an independent clan group. A group of clans that are under their high king, named Robert. So you can see that there are historical aspects there, but there's also a lot of fantasy that's wrapped into that. Whereas you have Eisen, which is effectively the Germanic countries, just after the War of the Cross, which was about the objectionists fighting for religious freedom in a civil war that ravaged the country, which, if you follow history, is very much the Protestants. And it's not described as such within second edition as much, but you can, if you squint at it enough through a historical lens, you can follow most of the countries that are mapped out at the time in the 17th century in Europe and where they're falling into this. And you know, you have France, or Montaigne as they call it, which has a high king who is very, very flamboyant and doesn't want, you know, the church involved, has the finest riflemen known as the Musketeers that are loyal and honorable, and a elite guard that protects him at all times and takes care of things, and a very high upper class and a very low lower class, and not a lot of mid ground. Because that's the way they like it there, you know. And yet you have Castillo, which is Spain with a certain flavor of Mexico added to it. Which has a young king who is only 16 years old, who is being manipulated by the church and the Inquisition at the same time. But he's also protected from attacks by El Vagabondo.
El Vago.
El Vagabondo.
El Vagabondo, okay.
Yes, very different. So the Vagabond, who is this mysterious character who always seems to be there in the nick of time to always thwart whatever may be coming to the people and or the king. So it's the Zorro character. You know, and you have these this great difference between the upper class and lower class, where the upper class is trying to be proper and prim and very, very, businesslike almost in their attire. And these people who are flamboyant and, you know, rambunctious, and they dance and they sing and they have these wild parties, and, you know, and the nobles can't be seen with those people. You know, that's, you know, but family comes first, and family is family is family. So there's a lot of mixed metaphors.
Sure.
But at the same time, it creates a very flavorful world.
Yeah, it's very, very rich.
Yes.
Very rich.
So.
Then you got Usura, which is basically Russia.
Yes.
Where you've got Matushka, the spirit of winter, essentially.
Yes, who is a physical entity that you can meet.
Right.
I mean, as much as Usura has a lot of superstitions, lore, and things that are out there, their gods are physical. Mm-hmm. Like, and they don't call them gods; they're powers to them. But you have Batushka, Lishi, Chernobog, Borvoli, and what was it? Virana?
Virava.
Yes, Virava. Yeah. And all of them are physical entities that lived there and affect Usura and are terrifying. And powerful.
So the supernatural aspects of 7th Sea are there, but I would say they're very low key in a lot of ways.
They're fairy tales.
Yeah, you've got your fairy tales, like you do have monsters. Like, monsters exist. Fae exist.
Yes.
Like, there are horrible things out there that go bump in the night.
Very much so.
But I would say your common, like 80% of your population has never and will never see them.
Correct.
But I would say probably 40% of those believe in them.
Yes. Oh, very much so. In some of the countries, it's much higher.
Yeah.
It's much higher. Innsmore and Usura, the far ends of the scale, funny enough, on either side, are some of the strongest believers. Like, literally, like the salt over the shoulder, your iron horseshoe over the door, always, if a visitor comes late, welcome them into your home, for God's sakes. You don't want them snatching your baby and leaving you a stick.
Leaving you a pile of sticks, yes.
And you know what? An Innsmore person and an Usura person having a conversation would have a lot of stories to talk to each other about, and they would agree with all of them. By the end of them, they would be doing weird little rituals, and you wouldn't question it.
Yep.
Because all of it is true.
Yep.
So
it's not really like your, I mean, the supernatural stuff, even in like Pirates of the Caribbean, is more in your face than your average 7th Sea game, I think.
Than your average, I would definitely agree with that statement.
But I would say those elements are there.
Yeah, no, they are definitely there. I think what's interesting is that it produces a very hard fairy tale narrative that, and almost an SCP kind of like thing, where you have people who believe and know that these things are out there but have never seen them.
Yeah.
But when they do see one, they're like, oh, that's it. That's the thing.
That's the thing, yeah.
Oh, dear God, please come save us. Please help us with this thing. Chernobog has taken my daughter. And like, an adventurer is gonna go, I've heard of Chernobog. And then, like, the dude from Usura is going to be like, we're not getting your daughter back.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you pack up her things and burn them?
But nobody in that conversation says, Chernobog's not real.
Or, yeah, we got this. Yeah. Nobody's saying we got this.
Right. So it's not like your Dungeons & Dragons campaign where it's like, you're going to go punch a god in the face because you've got a +4 Holy Avenger and,
Yeah, and that's the other thing is that, like, even the most recognizable in terms, like, people know that there were dragons. Mm-hmm. The term Draconizen comes from it in this world.
Yeah.
And they're believed to have all been gone, but even the people of Eisen know that within the darkness and the shadows and the fog, there may still be dragons.
Sure.
And they're scared of that. And they have the most powerful weapons, metals, that exist to defeat those things.
Yeah.
But their country is screwed. Like, it's terrible over there.
The other aspect, the other kind of supernatural aspect of 7th Sea that I really come to appreciate is the magic. Because so the magic is all done in bloodlines, essentially. It is almost a national trait, in that, like, porte, which is the opening of portals.
Yes.
Or I should say tearing open of portals. That scream and bleed.
Yes.
is a very, mundane thing. It's a French thing.
Yes.
And then you've got, like, certain, like, shape-shifting abilities and stuff like that are akin to the Usurans. And you've got, glamours.
Yes.
And stories of the knights of old and stuff like that you can invoke.
You can embody some of the legends themselves.
From Avalon, which is England.
Yes.
And then, so you've got, these kind of come from, like, the bloodline of your, your sorcery comes from your bloodline.
Yes.
It comes from your ancestry and stuff like that. But also, along with a lot of the European influences and stuff like that, they've brought the church along with it. And, of course, it's not the church of, Christianity in this time around. We've got it's called Thea.
Yes.
And it is, there's kind of a parallel between that and there's like a Protestant branch of it.
There's Orthodoxy, there's Protestants, there were various prophets who came. Mm-hmm. And there's been 4. The first prophet had their tellings, the second prophet had their tellings, the third prophet had theirs, and the fourth kind of had their own. And because of that, and the variances therein, certain beliefs have carried. Orthodox believes only in the first prophet in the original stories.
Yep.
And those. Yep. Whereas, like, you have others that believe in the second prophet, but specifically don't agree with the third prophet. And then there are some who completely object to the fourth prophet. And
is it the fourth prophet, I think, that showed up and said all sorcery is evil?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and basically that's what birthed the Inquisition.
Yep.
And all of that is very lightly touched in second edition. Mm-hmm. And this is the only place where, I'm not going to say this is the only place, this is where I'm going to start a tiptoe, and that is that in first edition, they made it very black and white what happened. And what is known, and then what the storyteller knows about that. Without getting into heavy-handed details, the history was very well laid out. And in second edition, it's left to a lot more interpretation. Mm-hmm. And so it's put out throughout the whole book in various places, but never really culminated in saying this is what is known, and these are the faiths.
Yeah.
It's like this is this country, and these are the faiths that they have, and kind of why they have it. 1-2 sentences here and there.
Right.
And so it's much lighter. It's a much more open playing field. Mm-hmm. You're not locked down with the same NPCs and stories of who's really in control. You're left in a much broader paintbrush and kind of soft tones in the background behind strong feelings, if you will.
Gotcha. All right. Where do we want to go for here? Do you want to get into some mechanics? Do you think?
I think so, because
the world a little.
One of the things that
enough?
I think that's enough about the world, but I think one of the things that you've always said, and I completely agree with, is you've never had a hard tear down of these rules. I gave it to you to be able to do that with, and it's one of the things you do very well.
Yeah.
But mechanics teach us how to play the system, and I kind of want to look at this together. And we've talked about it a little bit already, but go through the discussion and then do a little bit of tear down to say, what is this really teaching us?
Yeah.
So give me your flavor on character creation, and then we'll talk a little bit about how the game is ran around that.
So we'll go through character creation a little bit here. I was actually kind of delighted at how light the system was. Mm-hmm. That is something I like. You know me, I love rules light systems. Mm-hmm. There's a handful of traits that are your main attributes, mm-hmm. And those are things like brawn and finesse, wits, and my all-time favorite attribute of all time, panache.
Panache, at least in term.
In term,
yeah.
But those are going to be your main attributes. All of your attributes start at 2. You can assign 2 more points, and then whatever nationality you choose is also going to give you to choose between 2 traits that your nationality seems to focus on, mm-hmm. and you get another +1 in one of those. So you'll end up with an accumulated +3 to your already 2 traits. They can go all the way up to 6.
Yes.
In the end. You'll then choose backgrounds. Mm-hmm. Backgrounds are essentially little bundles of, like, what were your professions? Mm-hmm. They actually look a lot like Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition backgrounds.
Odd that.
Well, I mean, it's a pretty common
It's
common
a package system that seems very common.
Yeah. So, you're gonna choose 2 backgrounds, actually. And those will provide you with a certain number of skills that you'll get level 1 in. It'll give you a couple of advantages, which are kind of like your edges or feats sort of things. They're modifiers to your character. Sometimes they're activatable for
like a power, almost
like a power. That they give you a special sort of quirk to your character. Some of these are keyed to nationality. So if you are, from a certain region of Thea, then you can take certain backgrounds. You then choose skills. Like I said, your backgrounds will provide for you a number of skills, but you then get 10 additional points to just freely purchase skills. You can't go above 3 in any of your skills during character creation. Worth noting that getting your skills up higher actually has extra bonuses above providing more dice. When you've got 3 in a skill, you can re-roll a single die per check. If you've got 4 in a skill, you can make 15s for 2 raises, and we'll get into what that means, because the dice system, you want to pair up, or you want to add up dice to make 10s.
We'll explain that in a little more detail. But
so like an 8 and a 2, or a 7, a 2, and a 1, all make 10s. That's how you'll roll a bunch of d10s, and you'll want to make groups of 10. If you have 4 dots in a skill, you can make 15s, and that equals 2 raises rather than making 2 10s.
Right.
So it's better. And then if you have 5 points in a skill, your 10s explode. If you roll a 10 on a d10, you can roll it again for an additional chance at successes.
All right, but you still get the first initial success.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, after you choose your skills, you can choose advantages. Like I said, you'll get some advantages from your backgrounds, but these ones you get an additional 5 points. Advantages have point values assigned to them, 1 through 5. Some of your more powerful stuff is going to cost more. Some of your less powerful stuff is going to cost less. Some of these are also nationality locked. So people from Eisen or Montaigne or whatever will have special advantages that they alone can take.
And they may require things to activate them as well.
Yes, some of them are called knacks, and they require what are called hero points to activate them. Hero points are a bit of a currency that kind of...
Yeah, which in the vernacular, knacks were the term for skills in the previous game. So a carryover, but not the same way, which threw some people off pretty hard. Yeah,
I could definitely understand that, and it threw me off pretty hard because I did know skills were knacks before.
Right.
All right, you'll have an Arcana. Arcanas are actually a little bit like a functional, like if you've played any White Wolf, they're a little bit like almost like a nature and demeanor sort of
Very
thing.
much so.
So each Arcana is a broad thing, like the hero, and it'll have a virtue and a hubris that goes along with it.
Right.
Now your virtue is something that is thematically alike to whatever the Arcana was.
Right.
It is typically you will use a hero point, and it will invoke some sort of a cool thing you can do.
Yeah.
Your hubris is kind of a... The closest thing I can say is like there are like hindrances in Savage Worlds, in that they're a negative role-playing cue.
Correct.
But provide hero points when you role-play them.
Correct. So if you find yourself to be, someone who is a gambler, and like you're trying to like talk to somebody at a club, at a pub or something like that, and get more information, but then a gambling game opens up at a table next to you, which is going to distract you. And you're like, guys, I'm just gonna do one hand. Just let me do one hand. Or worse yet, like you guys get some money together and you sneak off to go play poker and lose your money or whatever. Like that's you doing your hubris. That's leaning into your character's vices and things like that.
Yeah. One I saw, which was like, the warrior or something like that, where it was, the virtue was something effective like, activate, with a hero point to like take, less damage for the scene or something like that. But like your hubris was, no man left behind. Get a hero point when you go back into danger to rescue a friend.
Yes.
Yeah.
You put yourself at risk. Yourself or others at risk to recover someone. Yeah.
Yep. Now for a lot of characters, your character creation is going to stop there. However, if you have taken any sorcery, either because you were provided that in one of your backgrounds or you bought it straight up with advantages. Then you may also have the need to pick up whatever your sorceress background is and what abilities that offers you. Like we were talking about earlier, they are generally locked to certain nationalities. So Porte for Montaigne, Sorte for Vodacci, which is kind of like your Italy analog. And a number of others. Your Knights of the Round Table for
Knights of Elaine.
Knights of Elaine,
which is the glamour, where you're embodying the virtuous aspects of previous warriors of old.
Yep.
Orders of Tale.
I believe it's called Touch of Matroska.
Touch of Matuska, which used to be Pyramid, was the term before.
Yeah.
Where you can effectively take forms of animals to a degree. Yeah. So.
But there's a number of sorceries in there.
Hexenwerk was the other one.
Hexenwerk, yeah, for Eisen, the Germany analog.
Yeah.
So there's a number of these sorceries in there, and you'll have basically each time you are provided the sorcery background allows you to essentially go in and dip into buying sorceress powers from your appropriate sorceress lineage. And so you may get 1 greater power and 2 lesser powers or something like that from, for each purchase of sorcery. And you may end up with 3 or 4 purchases of sorcery if you really want to lean into it.
Yeah.
If you're background and then you go into your advantages and buy even more and stuff like that. Yeah. So you can come out pretty powerful out of the gate if you really lean into it.
Yeah. Likewise, there is another aspect within the advantages, kind of like sorcery, which is, dueling. And that is that, dueling is a thing in this world. Duelists are a thing, but at the same time, there's a weight to being a swordsman, and how you're allowed to be a swordsman in an impactful way. And they carried that over from First Edition a little bit, not nearly the same weight level, but when you take that, you are part of a society that has agreed how dueling will occur.
Yeah.
And how you will handle dueling, and that you won't do it outside of those things without taking a heavy price for it. But at the same time, you're given quite a strong hand when going into combat.
The best example I can think of dueling in 7th Seas architecture is the movie Mask of Zorro.
Yes.
When Antonio Banderas squares off with, is it Anthony Hopkins?
Oh, when he's learning?
Yeah.
Yes, it's Anthony Hopkins who's teaching him.
And he's got that 3 circles.
Yes.
On the thing, and he's like, "What do you know about the sword?" Well, the pointy end goes into the other man. Yeah. Okay, we have a long way to go.
We have a long way to go. Yeah.
And it's what that is that's a duelist talking to someone holding a sword.
Correct. And that's very legitimate that most people are not duelists, and if they are, they might be crafty with a sword, but a duelist will always be able to do better than any person who is just good with a blade.
Yep.
Without question. And the game leans into that quite hard.
It really does, yeah. With the duelist rules that we will talk about in a little bit are...
they're a weighty mechanic.
Yeah, they are a weighty mechanic.
Advancement.
Yeah, advancement was okay, so this is a place where I was kind of thrown a little bit.
Do we want to skip advancement and put it closer to the end?
No.
Okay, let's put it here.
No, I mean it's here.
Sure.
It's the elephant in the room. Let's talk about it.
That's fair.
All right. So you've gone through all that to build your character. How do you make your character better now in the course of play?
Or at the beginning, it's really weird where it's put in. The idea of stories.
They almost put it as part. In fact, they do put it as part of character creation.
Yes,
it's the last step. It's not your story.
It's not a requirement. They kind of leave it as you don't have to do this, but they highly encourage it. And effectively what you're doing is writing your own narrative of who your character is and will become. In point, I will, my overall thing is that I want to be a master duelist in Aldana. So step 1, I have to find a master.
Yep.
Step 2, I need to train with that master. I need to gain the master's trust. Step 3, I train with that master. Step 4, I gain the Eldana school.
Yeah.
Great. Right? I literally write that down and put it on my character sheet as my story. When I complete those steps, I have completed my story and I get that advancement.
And you get the Eldana school, yeah.
Right. And basically, I'm setting myself up to buy my advancement. Mm-hmm. How I want to buy my advancement. That's great. I mean, it paints a wonderful thing, and we always talk about give your storyteller what you want your character to do.
Yeah.
That's kind of perfect if you're dealing with that level of advancement, but sometimes it can get very gray what people write into stories.
Yeah, because there's not a lot of, so, it's very vague. Like, there's not a lot of great standards for, how to write your story. Like, what steps you will need along the way. Like, it sometimes tells you, like, how many steps.
It gives you a couple examples.
And it gives you some examples and stuff like that. But it's very open to interpretation about what is and is not an appropriate step of a story to get to a particular place. And the other thing is that just reading this from a storyteller standpoint, it dictates a lot of writing to the storyteller that these things will happen, right?
Yeah.
So, like, if you were to write on your thing, like you said, okay, so you need to find a master, train under that master.
Trust the master, train under the master, and eventually, and then gain the Eldana school,
Right, okay, so I know that Eldana master is going to be in Castile somewhere, right?
Probably. I mean, he could be elsewhere, but sure.
Sure. What if my campaign is taking place in Montaigne?
That's challenging.
That's challenging. So, I have to either find a way to bring an Eldana sword master from Castile to Montaigne, who they are at war with.
We're at war with, and kind of tentatively still are.
Possibly, like, shoehorning him in. Or I need to somehow shift my campaign over towards Castile to give you the opportunity to do this. If I can't do this in a convenient way, in a convenient time span, I am essentially blocking your character advancement because I haven't gotten around to it as a storyteller to put your opportunity to advance your story into the game.
And I think the other aspect is you and I both know that no matter how much force you push onto the players, if they want to go chasing after a puppy, they will go chasing after a puppy, regardless of if one of the players wants to go here, and one of the players wants to go here, and one of the players wants to go there. Now, I will say that there's nothing that says that, and the game doesn't discuss downtime at all. They don't discuss the side stories of things. Time is very flexible in 7th Sea.
Sure.
It sits pretty darn close to the flexibility of of Mouse Guard, even more so. Because you're not talking about turns, you're talking about scenes and acts. So, is it feasible that between Act 1 and Act 2, the group decides that they're going to go to this other thing, this other side quest, and while there, he runs across a master. Because he goes and gets his blades repaired, and the guy recognizes that it's an Eldana blade and says, oh, well then you must have gotten this from so-and-so. And now he's got a lead to follow and start finishing, parts of his stuff, which gives them a direction to follow. But it's an independent thing. It's a lone thing for the group not to follow. And that's a pretty easy follow. It, also in character stories might be like, I'm gonna get married. Or like, I'm going to go, find out who killed my parents. Or I'm going to, seek justice against something major. Or I'm going to, absolve myself of being hunted by the Inquisition. Like, all the players could have very, very vast stories. And it says you should always consult with your storyteller when doing these. But, some of these could be quite broad. And if your story isn't going for that long, your players may never advance any of these.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that can be kind of damning.
Yeah, it really can.
So,
no, on the other hand, though, I can see kind of where they were trying to go with this. Like, I mean, it's been that age-old thing of like, oh, do you allow your players to just spend experience points to increase anything they want whenever they want?
Right.
Or do you make them role play their stat advancement, you know?
Right.
Like, if they haven't said that they've been working out at the gym, do you allow them to buy up their strength?
Right.
You know, and we're not saying they have to do whole training montages that take up 15 minutes, or, you know, or anything like that at the table, but like, you know, hey, okay, I'm gonna hit the gym and then we're gonna go out adventuring or whatever, you know.
Right.
Like, okay, cool, you're hitting the gym. I know you're trying to buy up your strength. And that's been an age-old discussion from, you know, in any role-playing game, really.
Right, right.
So this is just that taken to the next logical level, but I kind of think it was heavy-handed.
I agree, and I think there could be a better discussion about it. And I've read some people throws at it where it's like a player's just like, hey, I want to get this, you know, 3-point advancement, right? So I'm going to need to have 3 steps in my thing, right, to be able to get this that are reflective of what I'm trying to do, right? So I don't have to write all 3 of them at the beginning. I just have to know that I have to have 3, and I'll work with the storyteller on each one of them. So maybe my first one is like, I don't know that I don't know what my final steps are going to be for becoming an Aldana master, but I know the first thing I need to do is I need to get myself I need to find someone who knows Aldana. It doesn't have to be a master, but I need to know someone who has Aldana to teach me, to start teaching me. Yes. So that'll be my first step of my, I think, what is it? It's not 5 points for a sword school. I want to say it's only 3.
I don't know.
It's either 3 or 4. So I need to have 3 points. So my first one is that. My other ones are blank, literally blank. And so at some point, the storyteller's like, you know, you find this guy and you notice that he's doing this. And you finally recognize that he's an Aldana person. Oh, okay. So I'm going to work with this guy who doesn't trust our group currently and is involved in the current plot. And I need to build his trust. Okay, so my second stage is I need to build his trust. Perfect. So that becomes the next thing. And that way you know how long it's going to take you as a player, and you're doing role-playing at the same time. And I think that's almost a easier way to move through it versus having this penned out thing that the storyteller now has to go, crap, how am I going to do this? Like, it is the question of where do you see your character?
Yeah, yeah.
Which is great. That's a fantastic question to ask.
It's good to have goals, yeah.
Yeah, and to know where your characters drive and where they're heading to. But at the same time, like, if you've got a bunch of people at the table and they're all just like, I just want to play 7C. Like, I'm not thinking about advancement. I'm thinking about story.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, maybe at the end of this, you can give us a couple of points and we can spend them randomly. There's nothing to say that you couldn't just do that.
That's true.
You know, or you can say, put in your stories that you have, 2 points of advancement. Great. Okay, so what do you do between stories that are 2 events? Write down what those events are to make your advancement. And now you have history to talk about, right? And that's another way to do it as well. But again, it's not your character actually doing it, it's happening in between. So I think there's some things to look at and to examine there that are kind of cool that you could carry over instead of doing XP in games.
Yeah, yeah.
At least in games that don't have direct advancement protocol, you know?
Right. So
let's
talk a little bit about mechanics.
Yes, because we kind of glossed quick through the D10 thing. But it's not as complicated, but it is odd. It is D10, it is roll and keep, but not the way that roll and keep works pretty much anywhere.
I wouldn't call it roll and keep. It's roll and add up.
Well, it's roll and add up, but only to a number, and then certain dice get set to the side, so you're only keeping certain dice, so it's roll and keep.
I guess. In the vaguest of sense,
Correct. Like,
so, alright, your main mechanic for just about everything here is going to be rolling D10s equal to your trait plus your skill. Okay? So, like, finesse plus firearms or whatever. I don't remember. They changed Pistols. A lot of the names of the skills. Yeah. And so you're going to take that number of dice, equal to your trait plus your skill. You're going to roll that many d10s. What you were going to try to do is make 10s out of your dice.
In most cases,
In most cases. Okay, so, say you rolled 5 dice, you rolled a 10, an 8, a 2, a 6, and a 5.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, your 10 is a 10. Mm-hmm. That stands by itself, that is 1 raise.
Yep.
Okay? Your 8 and your 2 add up to another 10.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. That's another raise. So, you've got 2 raises. Your 6 and your 5 add up to 11. Now, you've got a remainder on there. It doesn't, but that doesn't matter.
Trash.
It is 10 or higher. You've added those 2 dice together. The 1 becomes trash, essentially, but you've got 3 raises. You've got a 10, an 8 plus 2, and a 5 plus 6.
Correct.
Alright. So,
so you have 3 raises.
You have 3 raises in that. And then you will use those in your risks, which is what they call basically skill challenges, to accomplish goals within that risk.
Yeah, we'll talk about the teardown on that a little bit, but the difference is that if under that same situation, if I have a 10, an 8, a 6, and a 3, okay, a 10, an 8, a 2, a 6, and a 3, instead of that 5 at the end, I have a 10, that's great. Mm-hmm. I have an 8 and a 2, that's great. But
the 6
and the 3 don't make 10.
Yeah.
So now I'm in trouble because, and I say that I'm in trouble because I have dice that don't add up to 10. Those literally get set to the side, and the storyteller can buy them from you at 1 hero point per die. Now, hero points are like bennies. We'll get to how they're like bennies, but with a giant set of air quotes around that.
Yep.
But effectively, that creates a danger pool for the storyteller and gives you Benny pool.
The storyteller can then use that basically to increase the difficulty of things, add the number of successes you need in a risk.
Activate things.
Activate things for their villain.
Create more damage.
Yeah.
Yeah, all kinds of nasty, dangerous things that can come out of that.
Right. So you
create
don't
more
want
consequences
to ideally have these points left over, but at the same time, it's a double-edged sword. Because you get hero points, and you want there to be a hero point economy, right? You want there to be incoming hero points so you can spend and have outgoing hero points.
Because you do use hero points for different things. We'll get to what they're for.
But every single time that happens, you add danger points to the storyteller's pool, which makes things more difficult on you. So, do you want to or not?
Yeah.
Right?
So, hero points, they come in a couple different forms. You can just straight up fail. If you just want to fail a roll, you may roll no dice, I fail.
Yep.
You just get a hero point. Does that create danger points? No. It's just straight up easy. You can, hubris.
Yep.
You can activate a hubris, which we talked about just a little earlier. You can you can act in accordance to your quirk, which is another thing.
Yeah, a quirk is, I think, it's a kind of a side effect of having certain advantages.
Yep.
They're, again, role-playing cues, kind of like mini hubrises.
Yes.
They're little hindrances that, cause you to act in a certain way.
And then, as we said, your storyteller can buy the unused dice, and they convert. The uses for bennies are pretty simplistic. You can add 1 die to your die roll. You can add 3 dice to an ally's roll.
So they're always better to help with than to use for yourself.
Correct. You can activate a virtue, a sorcery sometimes, or an advantage sometimes, depending if they have those activations.
Yep. And
that may include some of your swordsman abilities and things like that are also involved in that in some cases. So they're there as a push of fate, if you will, on the hero side of the dice. But again, knowing that you have them says that you have the concerns of the DM having them as well.
Yeah.
The storyteller having them as well.
Yeah. See, that's if I can give my opinion on that, I dislike that greatly.
Yeah.
For me, I think that fosters an adversarial relationship at the table. There's a similar campaign special rule in Savage Worlds that is optional.
Yeah.
It's called Difficult Choices.
Right.
And the Difficult Choices special rule says anytime you spend a Benny, that goes, it doesn't go into the jar in the middle, it goes into the hands of the storyteller and becomes one of the storyteller's bennies.
Right.
And I personally never wanted any of my players to think, oh god, I don't want to use a Benny.
Right.
Because it might, this is going to create more power for the bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I feel like bennies should flow freely. Mm-hmm. They're a source of, they're called hero points in this game.
Yeah.
You figure that, the economy would be based around heroism, but it seems like it's rather instead, fueled off of villainy.
Well, and there's more to that with how the story goes. So, I agree that this is probably the first, I'm not even going to say toe, full foot in the lake of adversarial.
Yeah.
Of creating an adversarial situation at the table. Where it's not just you versus the game, but you versus the storyteller.
Yeah, yeah. Dune had a similar mechanic there, that I disliked as equally.
Yes, yes. And I'm not going to say that this is overall bad and a terrible mechanic. It shouldn't be included in role-playing games, because there are all kinds of games, and there's all kinds of stories, and there's all kinds of players who like to play those stories.
Sure, sure.
But this is not first edition's design.
I didn't have as much of a problem with it with Dune, because Dune made it very clear that, it was a world in which danger and peril lurks around every corner.
Exactly.
Your adversaries are lurking in every shadow, waiting for an opportunity to strike.
Right. They've been planning 26 and 10,000 years ahead.
Yeah. This is 7th Sea, though.
Yeah.
And this is swashbuckling high adventure.
Right.
This to me is like that pulp action adventure, heroic.
Right, but I'm wondering if it was meant to feel more like superheroes and villains.
I get that.
Like, you thought I only had one group of henchmen, when in fact, I have 12.
Yeah.
And it's like that. Yeah, danger points can do just that.
Yeah, I get it.
It creates dangerous situations that you can miraculously get out of. There's still a lot of turn in this game.
Yeah.
Even as you die, you get stronger, which is an interesting mechanic all its own.
Yeah, we haven't gotten into the death spiral yet.
But so let's drift a little further here. So
okay.
Risks themselves, we're kind of pulling this mechanic out of flow because it's necessary to talk about it, and that is that risks are the challenge. They are the hurdle that you're going to have in any encounter, whether it's action or dramatic.
Yeah, they're big dramatic tasks. Mm-hmm. Dramatic tasks almost properly if you play Savage Worlds.
Yeah, no, without a doubt.
In that, these are going to be there is a challenge in the room. There are henchmen here. The room is on fire, etc. So, what is your approach? What are you going to do?
Right.
Okay, well, I'm going to fight the henchmen. Okay, so your approach is combat. So now we know which dice you're rolling. You're going to be rolling your finesse plus your swordsmanship or whatever the skill is. Another person may try a different approach of I'm going to play the damsel in distress to try to distract some of the henchmen.
Right.
Okay, cool. So that might be a panache plus performance.
Sure.
Or something.
Right.
So you're going to roll your dice. You're going to pair off your 10s to figure out how many raises you are. And then we're going to assign those raises to essentially dealing with consequences that are in that room. Okay, so
or opportunities that may present themselves.
Right. So with my, with the fighting, it may just straight up translate to damage against the henchmen.
Mm-hmm.
With the damsel in distress act, I might be able to take some of those raises and reduce damage for somebody else because the henchmen are now distracted by that.
Correct.
Or I could open an opportunity where I bring somebody else into the scene, or I don't know. There's a number of things. It's all very open to interpretation. And that's kind of, I guess, again, the double-edged sword of this is there's not a lot of hard rules on how scenes, how risks should play out.
Correct. And they play out differently by player. It's not like everyone will always have the same risks, same consequences, and same opportunities.
Yes.
It is much easier as a storyteller if you do it that way, but it also makes for a very straightforward approach or itemized approach. But if you're going into a situation and everybody has different approaches, they're going to have different consequences. And they're going to have different opportunities that are presented. And that creates a plethora of bookkeeping for the storyteller.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, whereas like a typical thing like, you know, a typical example of like a group dynamic is, you know, now that the big bad evil guy, you know, attacked somebody on stage at the theater, and, you know, attacked somebody in the audience at the theater, jumped up on the stage and, has ran through the back of the stage, and on his way out, he knocked over a couple of the oil lamps. So the stage is caught on fire. And you know, what do you guys want to do? Well, we're going to chase after him. Okay. You make it into the back end of the theater, which is where all of the, you know, which leads into a dock area, which is now starting to catch on fire as well. You know, boxes and things. You can see that he's moving through the other side of the room, on the far end. He has henchmen up on the second floor, that have noticed you, and they have crossbows. So, we're in an action sequence. Your goal, because you're chasing after him, is to get to the other side of the room. Your consequences are the room is on fire, so you're mitigating damage from the room being on fire. The henchmen up in the balcony will be firing on you as well, so you have to mitigate their damage. But he also dropped something, a scroll case. Mm-hmm. You can't tell what it is, but you know he dropped it, so there's an opportunity to retrieve that. What is your approach? And everybody can take different approaches on that, but they're pretty much all going to be like athletics. I'm going to move through this. You know?
Yeah.
Somebody might be like, I'm actually going to go fight those guards. Mm-hmm. I'm going to reduce those guards in case it takes us more than one round to get through here. Another thing that can also happen is the storyteller can tell you that, okay, after the second raise, everyone will have an additional consequence of damage from the fire growing. Every two raises after that, fire will go up again and you'll have another consequence. You can have a timed event. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So it's built based on raises. All of these complications add more and more for the storyteller to manage.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of note taking to be able to track this. It's supposed to be very quick, but at the same time, every time I look at this, I'm like, complex scenes are complex.
Yeah.
And for players to envision all the pieces around them makes it even more hard. It leans me back into people looking at 5th edition with like layer actions and boss actions, you know, where you legendary actions,
yeah.
Like those kinds of extra mathematical things that you have to keep in your head, like, I didn't know this guy could do that. Crap. Okay, and now I'm going to do a layer action. A layer action, what's that? Gouts of fire come out of the, holes in the ground and spew lava in various areas. Oh crap, that's a thing. That's right. This guy doesn't take damage from that.
Man, I'll tell you what, say what you want about 5th edition, but, a goblin's a goblin's a goblin. And the bookkeeping on it is very little.
But a boss is no longer a boss. He's not just a pile of stuff with a couple of abilities.
Yeah.
He's a boss with things that can happen at the end of your turn versus his turn, and a layer that is super dangerous as well.
Yeah, no. I mean, I get it.
It's more bookkeeping.
It's just more bookkeeping.
Yeah. And that's all I'm saying here is that if you look at this, it sounds like a lot of bookkeeping, and in truth it is. But if you're one of those players who's all about like looking at the tactics of a game, this will drive you nuts because you'll never know. There's never a straightforward situation.
Yeah.
Everything is a new scene. So building a character who is designed for something, I'm not even going to say min-maxed. I'm not going to use even those terms.
Yeah.
Just designed for something means that you're going to struggle in any situation that isn't the one thing that you thought would be the right thing to do.
Yeah, agreed.
So
there's very much an incentive to make a very well-rounded characters because you never know what approach you're going to need in any given situation.
Or not, and just have the fumbling moments of like, I'm a swordsman now in a tea party.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I don't know how to handle this, kind of a thing. So I think there's a certain sense that role-playing comes from failure, and the merriment of those moments. And it definitely plays out that way. And you don't have to have as complex situations as I'm laying out, but if you come from a world where you've been doing that, it's hard to get those out of your head.
Yeah, yeah.
So
for damage tracking, we have something called the death spiral, and it notes a couple times in there. Yeah, always say with drama and musical sting.
Like literally, they want you to make it seem like
the death spiral.
Yeah.
So in this game, you have wounds and you have dramatic wounds.
Yes.
Which is very much that's a carryover from first edition.
Yep, definitely.
But they handle them far different here.
Yes.
Now the death spiral is essentially just a damage track drawn in a spiral shape.
Mm-hmm.
And along that way you have little bubbles, and then you have a star. And the star is basically it's like bubble, 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 star. Bubble, 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 star. Your stars are dramatic wounds, your bubbles are just your wounds leading up to that.
And wounds go away pretty easily.
Yeah. Wounds are not a big deal. Dramatic wounds are the big deal.
And understand that a dramatic wound is relatively challenging to get, unless it's a firearm. Firearms just do dramatic wounds that you cannot block.
Oh, really? Wow.
You're gonna take a dramatic wound. If I shoot you with a pistol, you're going to take a dramatic wound.
I actually didn't look up the rules for
firearms.
They are
very deadly. They're like, you see a dude with a pistol, you need to be worried.
Yeah.
You see a musket crew, you need to be worried.
This is why I played a gun bunny in our first edition game.
All good and fun unless you're also being shot at.
Yep.
So, yeah. And the whole point of it is that, of the death spiral, is that it leads to a finality that is a little gray at the end.
Yeah.
A little, but not, it's still death, but the thing is that as you take dramatic wounds, your character actually kind of gets better at shit. Because
they're more driven.
Yeah.
It creates a sense of urgency and danger for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are, I don't think I didn't write down what the actual spiral stuff was, but basically like you start getting like re-rolls on certain dice and like extra dice added to your
everything explodes instead of I have skills in this, all of my stuff can explode now.
Yep. And then helpless.
And then you're helpless.
Yeah.
And my thought about that is that, watch The Princess Bride. Look at Inigo Montoya as he's getting wounded and getting better until he's this monster at the end and then just collapses.
Yep.
He's not dead, but he is pretty helpless. Or Wesley himself, like literally reaches the near path of death and then he's amazing. Right. And weak, but like, still use his intimidation.
When that moment came to fight Humperdinck.
Yeah.
Well, not fight him, but confront him anyways.
Right. Well, he did fight him with wits.
Well, with wits. Yeah. Sure.
It's a confrontation. And that's one of the things about the game. It's a dramatic confrontation.
Yeah.
Not an action. So,
the one thing I did really like about the damage mechanic though, is there's a rule called seeing red.
Yes.
So at a certain point, like, okay, say you can take 5 wounds before you take a dramatic wound, right? At like 3 wounds, you can see red. Okay, there's a little line there, and you can basically say, you know what? Close enough. I'm going to take the dramatic wound.
Just to ramp yourself up.
And you deliberately lean into the dramatic wound to get your bonus.
Right.
And I thought that was kind of cool because it was just like it's a neat little sacrifice mechanic, I think. It's a good character decision to just say, I'm going to take a little extra damage, I'm going to red line it essentially.
Yeah.
For the extra bonus. So I didn't want to get too much into it. There are rules for dueling. There are rules
challenging.
There are rules for ships.
Yep, ship to ship and having multiple people on a ship.
The dueling rules are kind of interesting. There's a lot of different sword schools. A lot of culture written into those sword schools about where they come from, how they fit into the particular culture they were grown out of, and what they look like in practice. They'll provide you a benefit if you are fighting in the particular style that the school teaches.
Mm-hmm. You will either get an additional action effect you can do with one of your raises, or it'll alternate an ability, like your feint will be replaced with a different kind of feint.
Right.
So.
And they're not all the same. Like, we say sword schools, but they're not all sword schools. Like, there's one for, Eisen that's all Zweihander.
Yeah, two-handed fighting.
There's a dagger school from Montaigne.
There's a cloak school.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you've got, two-weapon fighting, cloaks, all kinds of stuff, but they're also connected to a specific, nation. So. And then,
the dueling rules also kind of had a really interesting, at least I thought so, because I think we only played once.
Yes.
That I recall. And we did employ the dueling rules, and I thought they were kind of cool, because there's a real rock, paper, scissor, lizard, Spock thing going on with them.
Kinda, yeah.
So you're afforded 6 different types of moves you can use.
Maneuvers, yeah.
Slash, parry, feint, lunge, bash, and riposte.
Yes.
And you can't do the same move twice in a row.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's this kind of a strategy of okay, if I bash you, that means you're going to be doing a lot less damage. So
on your next strike.
So you're probably not going to do a slash. You're probably going to fall back into something defensive, which means that I can take a moment to recover, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. I can play it up differently. Also, the fact that if I'm just better, meaning I have more raises than you, I'm faster than you, I'm going to get my actions before you. If I have 6 raises and you only have 4, I'm literally going to get 2 attacks before you can do anything.
Yep.
You can't even recover from those.
Yeah.
So I may open with a slash and then move immediately to a lunge, so that your first maneuver has to be something to mitigate the lunge damage.
Yep.
So you're already on the defensive, and or eat all of that and go at me.
Right.
And
so then, there's an element of strategy to it.
There is. It is definitely, there's certain Dark Souls parts to that.
Yeah, a little bit.
Right.
Parry this, you casual.
Exactly. So I like the overall design that it makes dueling and duelists very dangerous.
Now, you did mention, though, that, touching on that it's very dangerous, though, that a regular combatant is limited to essentially one wound per turn.
Where effectively, yes, they can. If I have, for instance, if I am a fighter,
one instance of damage, I should say.
Correct.
Yes.
If I'm a fighter and I am making an action against you, a duelist. So we are going I'm just a dude with a sword, and I'm going against a villain who's a duelist. So my approach is going to be finesse and fencing.
Yeah.
And my action is I'm going to spend raises to do damage.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? I have, even if I have 5 raises, right? To his 5.
Yeah.
The best I'm going to be able to do is the damage of 4 raises. Because I'm going to spend 1 to do it, and the rest of them are going to go toward damage. He is going to get 5 maneuvers on me, which are all going to do different levels of damage, and one of those maneuvers can be ignore my damage.
Yeah.
Or turn my damage against me.
Yep.
Riposte. So and the other thing, and this is not a bad place to put it in, because we're going to start talking about how the games ran, is that literally in the rules it states villains go first. So in a tie, villainy wins.
Yep.
You're set on your back foot every time. So no matter how well you're matched, remember that they're going to get the jump.
Yep.
In most cases. So in that sense, they are going to get that opening volley. They are going to get that. So back to your character from first edition who was a gun bunny, unless she was fast, those bullets came first.
Uh-huh.
And those are dramatic.
Yep.
And it sucks.
Yep.
You know? And
luckily she was fast.
She was pretty darn fast, I'll say that.
Yeah.
But that's the whole thing is that the game, you know, we talked about a little about running the game, but it definitely does lean into an adversarial aspect to the point where the game, through running the game, talks about villainy and how villainy works. Mm-hmm. Your villains aren't full statted out. They have 2 stats, infamy and strength, that make up a total number. That number in half, rounded up, is their dice pool for everything.
For everything.
Straight up. So if I have a true villain, 20-point villain, between their infamy and their strength, they are rolling 10 dice to do things.
That's unfathomable.
They're a villain.
It's unfathomable.
You ready? They're a villain who's a duelist who has 10 dice to roll against you.
That doesn't feel good.
It feels pretty adversarial. Secondly, to gain infamy, it is a betting game. Mm-hmm. And I say that in a weird way, but the truth is this. Say I'm the storyteller, and I'm running the game. And the story, you guys are in Castillo. You're following one of the other players' plots, right? Sure. One of their stories. They're trying to find their lost sister.
Doesn't matter,
right?
Sure.
That's your thing, right? I can have the villain do a heist. He's gonna rob the bank, right? So I'm gonna take, 4 of my infamy. Mm-hmm. I have 8, let's say, because I'm a 8. I have 8 infamy and 2 strength. I'm not that great at weapons and stuff, but I'm pretty villainous otherwise.
Sure.
Right? I'm Humperdinck.
Yeah.
Right? So, I do this heist. If I succeed, I get twice my infamy back. My guy gets stronger. And I can spend that infamy on other things. I can spend it on brute squads. I can spend it on, finding out information. I can do all kinds of stuff that are literally in the rules for the storyteller to do.
Like go play Dungeon Keeper.
Exactly. The game definitely sets that tone of how to be a villain and run a villainous game. Not, there's a villain and these are the things that are kind of going on, but do they succeed against the players?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're stronger now. And I guess you could read it to the tone of this is what's going on and this is how you calculate whether the players are breaking down the villain or strengthening them. And to a degree, there's a certain sense that I like that, but by explicitly putting the rules, you're teaching someone to be against the players, to make it challenging.
I think, though, at the same time, though, is teaching the players to be against the villain.
There you go.
And there's a part of me that feels like you've got a lot of irons in your fire, because like you said, in your example, you're like, okay, we're off pursuing a personal goal. So-and-so has a story that they want to raise their, whatever skill by another point. So
they got 2 advancements or whatever.
They've got to go help so-and-so's sister with this thing.
Right.
And then there's this heist going on. It's like, darn it, we're doing something right now.
I'm a little busy, can't you see?
I'm a little busy, but you've kind of got to drop everything and go fight the villain. And I think, I see what they're going for. It's taking the heroes and mashing them together with the villains and going, now kiss.
Yes.
Yes. You always have to combat your villain. You always have to try to stop them from gaining their power. And if they do, it's a system that is established. It's really no more than a doom clock from another system.
It's very much a doom clock.
If you don't thwart your villain, they grow in power, and then you need to thwart a higher power villain next time around.
Right. And they can buy henchmen. Once they get up to once they're above 10, it's very cheap for them to buy a henchman who's 5 points and start raising them up. So now you have henchmen who are effectively small scale villains doing a bunch of crap on their own and spending their own infamy. I mean, it's funny. But if you start comparing it to movies, it's the whole Is he famous? He's infamous. Oh, that means he's more than famous, kind of a thing. but it's there, and like, there's a weird, sick part of my mind that when I looked at this, I said, this is bad for showing this to the players. Mm-hmm. But it's good for a storyteller to look at and say, how do I know how my villain's doing? Where his strength is at?
Yeah.
Did something succeed? Good. What did he invest in that to make it successful? Was it a heavy investment or was it a light investment? It was a heavy investment. Okay, then he gained a heavy success out of it. What does that mean for the villain? What assets does he now have? What does his new resource base look like? Yeah. That's what this is painting. That's what this is showing. Like, and as he spends his infamy, he's losing resources. He's going to have to regain those somehow.
Yeah, I kind of get it. I kind of get it.
It's helping you understand that economy going back and forth within the telling of the story from that aspect.
I get it. I think I'd have to see it in action, but I see at least what it's trying to do, and I'm going to give it the credit for trying to do something cool with its villains.
Yeah, especially in a mechanical way versus just kind of hand waving, saying this is what you should do.
Yeah, exactly.
And for someone who doesn't understand the psychological and mathematical things that roll through a 10, 12, 14-year storyteller veteran who's dealt with heroes and villainy and kind of have this mathematics of what the monarch is, in the background as a villain and how they succeed and fail and grow and fall and such, and the vacuums that can create. This gives you some scaffolding.
Yeah.
Which is nice, honestly, in that sense. It's kind of a nice thing.
Yeah, I see it. All right, you want to go into closing thoughts?
Sure. I actually didn't write them down for a reason.
Neither did I.
Neither
did I.
I'm going to ask you, what did you think 7th Sea 2nd Edition did well?
So I stated at the beginning, I particularly like how light the system is. There isn't a lot to keep track of as a player.
As a player, I would agree. There's not a lot to keep track of.
There's not a lot of numbers. Your numbers are simply, attribute plus skill, roll that many dice. It's your very simple formulaic dice pool mechanic.
Yeah.
I don't particularly care for the dice mechanic, but I understand it.
Yes.
And it's easy for me to understand, and I can absolutely I can absolutely engage with it at the table.
Yeah.
And I would never feel lost with that. And I think now that I've gone over the villainy rules with you and stuff like that, I kind of see where they're going with that, and I appreciate the efforts that this game makes to make the heroes, make the villains, and make the heroes do heroic stuff, and make the villains do villainous stuff, and, like I said, mash them together in the middle of the table and say, now kiss.
Okay.
And to me, that feels like the swashbuckling high adventure that I would be looking for. I know 7th Sea can drift into a very, political, very social, very Game of Thrones and Masks sort of game.
It can.
But I feel like the rules in 2nd edition do very well to kind of put the heroes into the action and put the villain at the heart of that action and make those sort of bombastic high adventure swashbuckling stories that we've all heard of and love. So that's my what it does well.
So one of the things that I will say that it does well, and it took me to just a few minutes ago to recognize that it is an exceptional thing that it does that is not easy to see unless you really examine it.
That's called character growth, ladies and gentlemen.
Do I get an advancement?
You do get an advance.
Awesome. At no point is it in the rules that it states you cannot do that approach. It won't work.
Yeah.
So I'm at a dinner party. Mm-hmm. I'm a fighter, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not a dinner party person, so my approach is intimidation. Mm-hmm. I am going to make people not want to talk to me or talk to me based upon literally my stature. I'm using the not say a word option. Just stare. Like that's what I'm using.
Remain silent.
Remain silent.
Yes.
That's literally I'm choosing that as the option for my approach. So the storyteller's going to be like, okay, so intimidation's your role. Great. Okay. But I'm good at it. Like I've got 3 dots in intimidation. Like that's something I'm decent at.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
There's no point where the storyteller could be like, no, that's not going to work. And after the roll, it works. I mean, I made raises. I'm spending them to mitigate things.
Sure.
It's not, oh, I'm going to charm the guards. You can't. Like that's, they're not going to be charmed by you. Is a D&D response.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to charm the Naga. No, you're not.
I want to seduce the dragon.
Yeah. Like, these are the things that we say all the time, and people are like, but why not? This game basically affords you well, I just fucking did.
Yeah.
Well, and that just blew me off of iTunes. Never mind. Anyways, but the point is my point to this is that it's literally not stated.
I think we get 1.
Probably. I'll take that one. Once a year, probably. But my whole point is that it's stated how raises work and how you make your approach. It's not telling you that approach won't be functional.
Yep.
So I like that to a degree because it does expose that it's a heroic game and things can happen.
Sure.
You know, Evie can be the bookworm who is tender and kind and easy to get drunk, but at the same time is also passionate about knowing about Egyptology and is a strong-willed person.
Yeah.
And she can effectively be in combat or in a discussion or in, or attempting to use her wiles against someone else.
It's very easy to become a fan of your players.
No.
No.
I think the mechanics do the opposite of that, and it's sad. I think that it is easy for your players to become a fan of each other.
Okay.
So that it's no longer like, I don't like that the rogue just gets away with murder all the time.
Sure.
You kind of enjoy that because now they can do other things with that skill set. It is closer to Suede in the I am helpful wherever. And that's an aspect that I like. Where I think that turns is how all of the mechanics lean toward the storyteller having literally swaths of things to slap at the players. And like mechanics that literally are there to tell you, spend these dice as a storyteller to do bad things to the characters.
Yeah.
I'm not doing those bad things to advance you. When I spend out of my danger pool, at no point is what I'm doing helping to advance your character.
It's literally just making life harder for you.
Correct. Now, on the other hand, if things in my danger pool went against your stories, like I could activate your story.
Sure.
Right? Which would make things more difficult because it would now bring other elements in that you have to make decisions on. Mm-hmm. That's not in there.
Yeah.
But that would be a fan of my players. Because now I can be like, oh, you didn't expect this to happen. And now your sister's in the room. Like the villain, like I now have that sister you've been searching for. I have a scrap of her clothing. Wouldn't you like to know more?
Yeah.
Oh great. Like now I can't kill this guy. I need him alive.
Right.
And then I also need to serenade him until he squeals and tells me everything I need to know. And that's the thing is that the mechanics aren't there for it. They're leaning toward how do I make the players' lives more difficult? And that's it. How do I make this scene more difficult by putting more bad guys there? By making the bad guys do more damage? By
making raises more difficult to get. Yeah.
Right, by causing dramatic wounds, by killing players off. That I have to spend those to kill characters, not players.
Depends.
Certain days. Depends on how many D4 and how dark it is.
Right.
But the whole point is that it's not leaning into you being a cheerleader of party.
Yeah. You're not setting the players up for success. You're setting them. There's no incentive.
There's no mechanic.
There's no mechanic to assist the players through adversity.
Correct. Or turn the adversity into a role-playing opportunity. To advance their character. I would much rather have seen that a villain can learn more about the player and turn it onto them individually. Make it more about them.
Right.
Like, oh, I'm going to spend a danger point. Now, where when I put pressure on, it forces you to do something. You can't just run, or you must run, kind of a thing. Like, there's something else there that's missing. And I feel like there's an edge there in the way of doing the storytelling that the mechanics don't give you.
That's fair.
So, and that's where I feel it fails. I think there's a success point there, and I think there's things you can learn through the mechanics. But by having them in black and white in front of also the players in that core book makes it feel like it's telling you the truth behind it, which is that you're not supposed to be a fan.
Yeah.
And that feels counter to what 7C is.
A little bit, yeah.
So,
any other closing thoughts?
Do you have any? Like, what do you feel was like the greatest failing of it?
For me, I feel in a certain sense, like I didn't get this system in the same way that I had trouble wrapping my brain around Powered by the Apocalypse.
Okay.
There's a lot of stuff in Powered by the Apocalypse. It's just like there's no initiative in Powered by the Apocalypse.
Nope.
It's just, I don't know, what does the scene feel like you should, or go in,
sure.
Just make sure everybody gets a turn, and other than that, it's just chill.
Yeah.
We're just telling the story here,
Sure.
Now this does have an initiative system, and that's basically just whoever's got most success, the most raises at the table.
Or the villain.
Or the villain on a tie. But I think where it starts losing me is, like we were discussing at dinner, where there's no hard mechanics on things. There is no way to know essentially what your character's good at, what your character's going to be good at in any given scene, or how to predict or how to math out anything. It's really just left up to whatever the storyteller feels is the most appropriate for that scene, and you've just got to kind of hope you've got the tools to deal with it.
And scaling back becomes challenging.
Yeah.
I mean, they say everything is negotiable, even the rules. And if you watch playthroughs, you'll definitely see that.
Sure.
I mean, even with John as the storyteller, if you catch a playthrough that John has, which there's a few out there, there's not a lot, but there's a few, you will see that even he is exceptionally flexible with the rules of his own system and what he's flexible about. And if you're truly interested in second edition and how it's played, watch a few of his playthroughs.
Yeah.
And see how he runs it, because he's the core designer.
Yeah.
He's the one who has the feel and what he's trying to teach you on how this game should be played. And I think that is an advantage of this system, is we get to see the original 7th Sea and all the years that it's have, and then the creator creating something new. Now, granted, he had other people wrapped around him and a lot of playtesters and a lot of other components that went into it, but in the end, it was him. And seeing him run it, like if we could see Gary Gygax running 1st edition, 2nd edition, 3rd edition, 5th edition. So ain't nobody want to see him running 4th edition.
Not you. 5th edition.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. So, like, I think we would have a very different opinion of what D&D looks like.
I mean, yeah, probably.
I mean, people would still run it the way we want to run it, but I think some of the people who were getting into it would look at it with a slightly different lens.
Yeah. So. Yeah, sure, absolutely. So we had one question.
Came in late.
From Nevim, who always has such great questions. Thank you so much.
Keep it up, Nevim. You're doing great.
Absolutely, man.
Loving every moment of it.
So the question is, what part of the rules would you like to take into another game?
Game or game? So I like dueling in this. I think it would be neat to see that in a different system that had that was more of a tactical game, like a Final Fantasy Tactics, TTRPG.
Right. Okay.
Would be neat, kind of a thing there. But I think the villainy could be extracted without any loss.
Yeah.
I think that right there could be a neat system to have in a lot of other games where you've got a primary villain that's building. That's starting from a small point and building up. Because you then have a quantifiable way of handling their forward progress without having to take guesses at it.
Right.
And MacGuffins and all kinds of things and make it work. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Like, if you were just running a straight up, kids on bikes, right? And you needed a villain in that. And why not use this kind of framework?
Where the villain is trying to accomplish goals. If they accomplish them, they become stronger, and the kids on bikes have to constantly thwart them.
Correct.
Yeah. It's constantly generating goals for the heroes.
And when are you done with that villain? Like, when have they been beaten down enough that the players can walk right into their lair?
Yeah.
Or meet them and be like, I'll get you next time, as they're going off to jail or whatever. Like that, knowing where the end of your villain is when you're playing a game that has risks and rewards like that changes the way you write your story, because now you can start the villain off at a slightly elevated position, just slightly, and know that they're either succeeding or failing.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's kind of cool. That's kind of a cool mechanic to be able to carry over. And I'm definitely going to add it to the list of things of, like, try this, that will be coming out. I promise you, I'm going to be getting this thing out there. I swear. I swear. It's really cool. Patreon people will get to see it beforehand. But, just this concept, Nevim, is actually something that I've been working on, I think, since January. And I've been just accumulating all kinds of things from different systems that I think can play well in other systems, where different things you can try as a storyteller in your games, or even as a player. Just little simple paragraphs. Try this, and see how it plays out for you. I'm not saying that it's going to work great. I'm not even going to say that I've used it, but I will say that looking at it, I can see that there would be some interesting pieces, and I think this could really help early storytellers have a framework for villainy without writing an epic tale of where things are going to end.
Yeah.
Knowing where your guy is going doesn't necessarily tell you everything he's going to do to try and get there, and your players are going to mess with him a lot.
Right.
And not every epic writer knows to do that, because you're not an epic writer.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you aren't. I'm saying in general.
No, I'm not.
Yeah. You have your moments. You have some epic moments that you do.
Some moments.
Yeah. So, are we good? What would you carry? Let me throw that out.
I really like the dueling rules.
Okay.
I liked the kind of rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock thing that they had going on. It reminded me a lot of the conflict rules from Mouse Guard, where every move in the conflict had kind of a counter move to it, and you kind of revealed them at the same time, and then saw how they interacted, and then adjudicated that interaction. And if you guessed well, if you played good enough mind games with the opposing side, you could outmaneuver them. Throw scissors when they throw paper, throw rock when they throw scissors.
Yeah.
And
make it through.
I kind of do like that aspect of it. I don't know how I would transplant that into another game, though. Because it is tied so intrinsically to 7 Seas mechanics.
There's a lot of heavy mechanic to it.
What I will say, though, is I kind of liked the seeing red mechanic as well. So like in Savage Worlds, imagine being able to like take +2 damage from an incoming attack and get a Benny for it.
I think that's something you could carry over with some systems.
Yeah.
I think as you have that danger mechanic where you can say, like, I'm leaning into this because I'm doing something dangerous.
Right.
Give me something that will add to my next roll. Because, I can basically, I am pushing myself into something because I need to go, flip the lever on the reactor. So I'm going to ignore all these guys who are in this room fighting with me. And for that, I'm going to get extra dice that I'm going to be able to spend because I'm risking.
Or even just on top of that, there's one of the favorite things that Sean and I have from the Wheel of Time series are the Sword Masters. And they go into great detail on a lot of the different maneuvers that the sword masters use. And there's a technique called sheathing the sword.
Okay.
Or sheathing the blade or something like that. And it is essentially I am not going to dodge as you stab me.
Right.
But I know where your sword's going to be occupied, and that's going to be in my chest, and that's going to allow me to do all sorts of stuff to you.
Okay, which we've seen definitely in movies and
such.
Yeah,
it's the suicide move, of the, I'm just going to let you stab me so that I can chop your head off.
Right. Right.
And maybe I'll survive you stabbing me, but that's going to tie your sword up.
Right. Like, you chose the wrong place to stab me. You should have cut off my hand.
Yeah.
That whole thing.
It's going to be lodged in my chest.
Right.
And I know that.
Right.
For sure. So.
Right. Right. And that I'm going to be able to handle for more seconds than you losing your head.
And I thought, kind of that of like the seeing red sort of thing of just like leaning into the blade and just being like, that's fine.
No,
that's fine, but I'm going to glean an advantage off of this,
No, I see that. I definitely see that you could add something like that to certain game mechanics. I think that would be pretty cool. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Definitely.
All right.
I'm going to give us a minute before end call. So let's talk about that next week's topic.
Yeah. So our next week's topic is more of a discussional thing than a instructional topic like we usually do. We wanted to talk a little bit about our dream gaming spaces. Yeah. A little bit about the, what if money and space and time were not an issue?
Yeah.
What would we do with our gaming spaces?
I mean, just recently I had a discussion with my wife about, what I want to do down here, which I've had since we bought the house.
That'd be the basement here, sorry.
Yeah. That's here. And how I wanted to change up the space and make it something that would be fun for me and be creative for me and fun for my friends to come down to the point where other people would want to run games in my space.
Yeah.
Like that kind of a thing. And I think it's something that we could talk about, and I definitely think we can get it more than an hour out of it.
Yeah, definitely.
So, lead us out.
All right. Well, you can find us on Twitter at st_conclave. Listen to us, or join us on Instagram at st_conclave. Listen to us live every Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time on mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave. Join us up on our Discord. We'd love to have you in the discussion, bounce some ideas off of our fellow storytellers that are all up there. You can find that link on our Twitter, as well as our website, storytellerconclave.com.
We'd like to thank our Patreon members, all of them who help us every month, especially our name members, Knox in the Box Sam, the Arcane Asylum, Sparkle Motion Veteran, Subjet, and Hulavu. We really appreciate all of your support. Our pre-show music is by Arcane Anthems. You can find that at patreon.com/arcaneanthems. Our intro music is Beyond the Warriors by Geefrog. You can find that at geefrog.bandcamp.com or on Google Music. And our outro music, which you're hearing right now, is Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Midair Machine. You can find that at freemusicarchive.org.
And a big shout out as always to our families, Vicky and Sean. Thank you so much for loving and supporting us. All of our friends who've set our tables over the years to give us these great stories to share with you, and you, every single one of our listeners. We love you so much.
Love you guys.
Good night.
Good night.